Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on behalf of Alaska Public Media. It is Wednesday, November 9th, 2022, and we have a lot to talk about this evening on the national map. If you want additional weather information on top of what I provide in this broadcast, you can go to weather.gov. That is the National Weather Service's online presence. You click on the map, and it's interactive, and it'll bring up forecasts and any relevant watches, warnings, or advisories for anywhere in the country, plus all sorts of other information. Most notably, though, this afternoon, we have hurricane warnings along the east coast of Florida from just north of Miami, Boca Raton up through Titusville. And we have Hurricane Nicole. It was a tropical storm, just crossed over into hurricane intensity and expected to make landfall along the east coast of Florida Thursday morning. As a minimal Category 1 storm, but still, nevertheless, to be respected. In the north, we have blizzard warnings for areas of North Dakota, South Dakota, and ice storm warnings for parts of central and northern South Dakota as a pretty healthy early season winter storm impacts the northern plains, and that is going to usher in colder air across especially central areas of the continental U.S. Here is a map of the projected track of Hurricane Nicole. It was a tropical storm earlier this afternoon, but has now transitioned and intensified to a Category 1 hurricane that'll make landfall there along the east coast of Florida as we go through Thursday morning and crosses the state as we go through Thursday early afternoon into early Friday morning, recurves up through Georgia, and then eventually weakens into a tropical depression over the Carolinas later on Friday. So it's certainly been an active pattern here in areas of the state. The storminess has ended across the northwest. Winds have come down, snows have diminished. That's good news, but we still have some areas of light snow that'll linger across the central and eastern interiors tonight through Thursday and lingering into Friday with perhaps an inch or two of snow in some areas. We're going to see some snow, heavier snowfall, 3 to 7 inches across the northern panhandle tonight into Thursday, mainly along the Haines and Klondike highways, including areas like Haines, Juneau, and up towards Skagway. Not a major storm, but nevertheless, roads could be slippery, especially Thursday morning. A storm force low will track along the Pacific side of the Aleutian chain here for tomorrow, Thursday into Friday before weakening, bringing some strong gusty winds and some moderate to heavier rainfall. But the big weather news is the pattern shift coming in temperatures. We are going to see, we've already seen temperatures moderate a bit this week compared to how cold it was this past weekend, especially in through the mainland. It's going to turn quite a bit milder here next week. We could see some daytime temperatures well into the 30s, some 40s. Couldn't even rule out 50-degree reading with some downslope in certain areas near the mountains. So it's going to be quite a difference in a drier pattern, especially for areas of the southeast, including the Panhandle. But looking at things in the northwest up at Point Hope, still breezy there, but not the strong winds they've had the past couple of days. A little light snow and fog, 31 as of 2 o'clock this afternoon. In the northwest interior, Ambler had a winter storm warning in effect through 9 o'clock this Wednesday evening, just seeing some lingering patchy light snow and flurries, 28 degrees. So I think the best of the accumulating snows are done with now. Dutch Harbor, fading sun, clouds will be increasing, winds picking up, rain developing there as we go into especially later Thursday and Friday. Haines, the snow is on the way. It'll be developing as we go through this evening and overnight. And temperature there this afternoon, 25 degrees, and you can see the cloud cover thickening and the ceilings will continue to lower as we go through this evening with the snow developing. So here we still have a winter storm warning in effect for areas of the northwest interior, including Ambler and the upper Noatak Valley, but the bulk of the snows are winding down, just some patchy light snow left. In the southeast, the northern panhandle, winter weather advisory for areas along the Haines and Klondike highways. 3 to perhaps as much as 6-7 inches of snow could fall in the higher elevations, especially up toward places like White Pass. And that would be tonight through Thursday morning and tapering off as we go through Thursday afternoon. So here is the satellite imagery showing that moisture blossoming out over the east side of the Gulf. That's what's going to be bringing the snows to the northern panhandle tonight. And then if you look way off to the lower left side of your screen, you see the curve in the clouds. That's that strong low that's southwest of the Aleutians, and that low is going to track along and just south of the Aleutian chain through the Pacific side, bringing with it some moderate to heavier rains at times, and along with some gale and storm force winds. But otherwise, a little quieter weather should ensue across areas of the west coast. As we go through this afternoon, we see the low out in the western Gulf. We see that low southwest of the Aleutians, and then a weak low off the Russian coast with the trough extending through the Chukchi Sea. And later tonight into early Thursday morning, the low over the Gulf sits there, and a frontal band will push that moisture into the panhandle. Meanwhile, the low continues to work its way eastward there just on the Pacific side of the Aleutian chain, and the trough continuing there in the Chukchi Sea. For Thursday afternoon, we have a couple of lows there in the Gulf. Secondary low there just west of Haida Gwaii, with the snow continuing in northern parts of the panhandle. That'll begin to wind down as we go through Thursday afternoon and evening. Back to the west, pretty strong low, 963 millibar low there, just south of the central Aleutians, with a occluded front working its way and approaching the southern or westernmost tip there of the Alaska Peninsula, and a weak low there north of St. Lawrence Island there between the Bering Strait. And for Friday afternoon, the Aleutian low works its way just on the south side of the Alaska Peninsula in the North Pacific, with an occluded front stretching eastward, beginning to move up into the southwestern Gulf. Meanwhile, high pressure over western Canada has a ridge extending up into the Yukon, and the low pressure, weak low pressure, remains there along the northwest coast. So temperatures for Thursday morning are going to be near and a bit below freezing, especially the inner channels there of the panhandle. Outer channels like towards Sitka could still stop near 40. As we go further west, readings will be below freezing across much of south central into the 20s and some teens, like at Glen Allen and McGrath. And then Thursday afternoon, we expect highs to be around or a bit above 40. The outer southwestern coast, Sitka down through Craig, mid-30s, so the snow could mix with a little bit of rain before ending. And then back to the west, Anchorage should get temperatures back up a bit above freezing, up through the Matsu Valley, near and tad above freezing. Friday morning lows, if there's any clearing, single digits there, Copper River Basin. Otherwise, teens and 20s. And then for the panhandle, lows generally near and a bit above freezing. Friday afternoon, we'll start to see temperatures back mid-30s to around 40 degrees panhandle, a little above freezing there for Anchorage area, and getting back up into the 40s, 46 at Kodiak as that front works its way eastward from the Aleutians, bringing in that milder air. Further north, teens, some single digits in through the eastern Yukon Valley, Yukon Flats. Thursday afternoon highs generally in the 20s, could even be near 30 there at Nome, but the Brooks Range still keeping temperatures in the teens, as well as the Yukon Flats. Any clearing Friday morning could see temps dip below zero. East side of the Brooks Range down through the Yukon Flats, and then Friday afternoon, high temperatures, teens, and pretty much there in the east central interior, 20s elsewhere. And looking at the southwest, temperatures Thursday morning will generally remain in the lower 20s across the southwest interior, but above freezing, mid-30s to around 40 out through the Aleutian chain. And then Thursday afternoon, temperatures could be as warm mid to approaching upper 40s there, eastern Aleutian, so that'll be the warmest temperatures there in the state. For Thursday afternoon, Friday morning, lows will stay generally near or just above 40 there through the eastern Aleutians, tip of the Alaska Peninsula, but down into the teens as you get up through the middle Yukon Valley, upper Kuskokwim valleys. And highs Friday getting back up into the 40s along the Alaska Peninsula to Kodiak Island, and moderating to a bit above freezing even at places like Bethel. But here's the big news: extended temperature outlook. As I was indicating, we're looking for a good chance of above normal temperatures next week across, especially mid and late week, across much of the mainland. And reason being, we have a trough that's forming, cold trough, bringing wintry temperatures and conditions there to the central continental U.S., so that makes Alaska the warm spot. And precipitation should average below normal, especially in the southeast and panhandle during this time frame, with perhaps a little bit above normal precipitation along the Brooks Range in through the North Slope and Arctic coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Let's take a look at your aviation weather. And if you have a flight plan Thursday or on Friday here to close out the week, extensive IFR conditions are anticipated across areas of the interior here for Thursday morning, as well as into the panhandle, especially the north end, where there will be snow falling winter weather advisories in effect. There are a few different features we're watching. There's a low out in the Gulf of Alaska, another stronger storm force low. It is tracking just south of the central Aleutians early Thursday, heading eastward. And then we also see some IFR conditions scattered about areas of the west coast around Norton Sound, down along areas of the southwest, including Kuskokwim Bay. For Thursday afternoon, widespread IFR conditions anticipated there across the panhandle, continuing up through the Copper River Basin, areas of the eastern interior along the Alcan border, south side of the Brooks Range, and then we have IFR conditions with that strong storm force low working its way there through the Aleutians with an occluded front, along with windy conditions, turbulent conditions. There could be some severe turbulence there in areas of the especially eastern half of the Aleutians into the tip of the Alaska Peninsula. Friday morning, still seeing IFR conditions in portions of the panhandle, mainly the south and the intercoastal mountains, along the Alcan border north to the Arctic coast, back toward areas of the Chukchi coast south of Point Hope and down through the Seward Peninsula, as well as the lower southeastern quadrant of the Bering up into the Alaska Peninsula. Friday afternoon, we expect conditions to improve across the central eastern Yukon Valley. Also, conditions should be improving through the panhandle, but we do expect areas of IFR along the northwest coast down into areas of the southwest and out back through the central Bering. Anatuvik Pass should generally see IFR conditions on Thursday, as will Adigan Pass. Further south and west, Lake Clark and Merrill MVFR to start the day, becoming VFR, especially along the east entrances by Thursday afternoon. Further north, Rainy Pass, IFR conditions giving way to MVFR conditions, with those MVFR conditions most prevalent there along Midway and through the west side. Windy Pass should generally hold on to IFR conditions Thursday, as will Isabel Pass. Further east, Mentasta Pass should generally see MVFR conditions prevail on Thursday. Further south and west, Tanita Pass, IFR conditions, and Portage Pass, IFR conditions there early in the day, giving way to MVFR conditions. And then finally, in through the northern panhandle, Chilkoot and White will see IFR conditions with lower ceilings due to snow and reduced visibility. Now, freezing levels Thursday morning are down around 2,000 feet aloft there along the outer panhandle, and creep upwards above to near 4,000 feet in through the central Aleutians associated with that storm force low. Surface freezing line generally runs out there through the northern Bering, along the southwest coast, as well as the Gulf Coast into the inner channels there of the panhandle. And looking at the icing potential, greatest icing threats, some considerable moderate icing possible there along, especially the outer coastal areas of the panhandle down into Haida Gwaii from above 4,000 to above 6,000 feet, and then back out through areas of the lower Bering and around the eastern Aleutians into the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, generally above 5,000 feet. And looking at jet stream level winds, there is a weak low circulation at 30,000 feet there just north of the central Aleutians, with a 130 knot jet core to the east. Southwesterly winds aloft there south of the Alaska Peninsula, and across the panhandle, winds upwards just above 100 knots there. Central northern panhandle from the south-southwest, bringing it down to 700 millibars, 9,000 feet approximately. Low pressure circulation, northern Gulf, back out toward the central Aleutians, and another low there in eastern Russia. Strongest winds, mid-levels, are coming in around Haida Gwaii, British Columbia, to 50 knots, 70 knots there just southwest of the central Aleutians in the circulation around that low. And then as we go down to 3,000 feet, we see a low circulation there in the northern Gulf. Strongest winds there, southern panhandle, upwards of 55 to 65 knots there, especially along British Columbia coast. And then that storm force low, we see winds of 50 to 65 knots circulating around that, and that will translate to areas of considerable moderate and some severe turbulence possible there, especially in through the eastern Aleutians into the at least the far southern extent of the Alaska Peninsula, surface to 3,000 and surface to 4,000 feet, and then also considerable moderate turbulence in through areas of the Panhandle and Haida Gwaii from the surface to 4,000 feet. Have a safe flight if you can get off the ground.
It's kind of hard to explain how important weather is to our job. I mean, it really affects everything we do.
In 2018, NOAA launches the GOES-S satellite, which takes its place in orbit as GOES-17. Working together with GOES-16, the two new geostationary weather satellites will provide constant watch over the United States and the Western Hemisphere, from the west coast of Africa all the way to New Zealand, helping monitor severe storms, wildfires, and daily weather patterns. Since its launch, NOAA's GOES-16 satellite has already demonstrated its critical capability for keeping our nation weather ready. Throughout the active 2017 hurricane season, GOES-16 delivered imagery with detail and clarity never achieved before, with 4 times greater resolution than previous NOAA satellites, and delivered this imagery faster than ever before, helping forecasters predict the path of a storm and where and when it will intensify. These accurate and timely forecasts allowed for emergency managers to prepare for evacuations, map flood areas, and save lives.
So the weather matters. The weather matters before the weather happens, and the weather matters after the event happens, because what we're able to do to prepare, allocate resources, provide information to the public through the media beforehand, and what we're able to do afterwards, how and when the waters are going to recede, so we know we can get vehicles with life-saving food and shelter equipment down a particular highway. All of that depends on the forecast.
In the GOES West position, GOES-17 will be able to provide critical data for the westernmost United States, Alaska, and Hawaii.
We're talking about getting data updates in just seconds, so we can quickly spot wildfires and closely monitor the wind direction and their intensity. The crispness of the data coming in at a faster rate will also help with fog forecasts. We can see the moment the stratus starts to develop or when it starts to move out.
Like GOES-16, GOES-17 carries a suite of advanced instruments, including tools for sophisticated earth sensing, lightning detecting, solar imaging, and space weather monitoring. As an equal partner in the sky, GOES-17 will expand coverage of the advanced baseline imager technology across the Pacific Ocean, allowing meteorologists and local officials to see severe weather systems developing in real time.
So instead of seeing something, say, this large, that as you zoom in actually gets kind of blurry, you're actually going to see something that is much more detailed.
In its GOES West position, GOES-17 will be able to monitor conditions in the western U.S. like wildfires, coastal fog, and atmospheric rivers when storms from the Pacific dump heavy rain and snow over the western U.S. GOES-17 will have a major impact on fighting wildfires in California. Up-to-the-minute information in crisp detail allows forecasters to spot fires faster than ever before, even before the first 911 calls come in, and to better track and predict the path of large, dynamic, and dangerous fires.
It's amazing to see what we can get and at the level of detail and the speed that we can get the information down into the ground that makes our decision making way more accurate.
With a view of the Pacific Ocean, GOES-17 will also provide a critical eye over shipping lanes vital to the U.S. economy, protecting cargo and passenger vessels from dangerous ocean storms. GOES-17 will also provide a high-definition view over Alaska, resulting in better weather forecasts and improved monitoring of sea ice, wildfires, and volcanic ash. The advanced baseline imager on GOES-17 can distinguish between clouds, sea ice, and snow cover, a critical need during Alaska's dark, cloudy winter months. GOES 17's geostationary lightning mapper monitors lightning flashes, including the in-cloud lightning most prevalent in severe storms, helping forecasters determine when a storm is forming, intensifying, and becoming more dangerous. Thanks to GOES 17, emergency managers will be equipped with more accurate weather predictions and faster warnings, providing a real impact, saving lives, and protecting infrastructure. Watching over Earth from 22,300 miles above, GOES S will provide vital data to our weather-ready nation.
Hi, I'm JPSS. I'm a high-tech weather satellite that orbits our planet. I do something called a polar orbit. I circle the Earth from North Pole to South Pole, over and over, while the Earth spins. While I do that, I get lots of information about what's going on around the globe. I watch storms, clouds, and rain. I take the temperature of the ocean, measure air quality, ozone health, and take pictures of the land and sea. This information is used for all kinds of things. It helps us take care of our coasts and oceans and all the amazing things that live there. It helps us monitor harmful weather events like floods and droughts and measure the health of the environment. Most importantly, it helps us predict weather 3 to 7 days in the future. That means I can be a big help ahead of storms, where future warnings are important. I send information to the National Weather Service. They use the information to create forecasts. The forecasts are shared with people all over the country to help prepare for weather emergencies. So you look to the sky and wave. I'll be flying by.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and let's jump into the sea ice edge. The ice continues to grow there across the far north along the Arctic coast, and we see areas of shoreline ice beginning to get better established along the northwest coast, areas of Kotzebue Sound, and then dropping further south, at least early ice there, expanding across Norton Sound and areas of the Yukon and Kuskokwim deltas. Also see a little expansion there of ice in areas of Cook Inlet, including Canet Arm and down around areas toward the entrance there, up even near Homer, a little ice there forming, Kamishak Bay as well. Okay, looking at the winds Thursday, we're southeast winds for the inner channels of the Panhandle. Gusts upwards of 45 knots, Petersburg, 35-knot gales there, Ketchikan, Metlakatla, waves 5 to 10 feet. 20-knot winds up Lynn Canal, 4-foot waves. The outer coast will see 35 to 40-knot southeasterly gales south of Sitka through Craig, waves 17, 15 feet, and winds not quite as strong further westward. And then on Friday, southeast winds 15 knots, middle lower inner channels, waves 3 to 5 feet. Northwest wind 20 knots, down Lynn Canal, waves 3 feet. And the outer coast winds turn southwest west south of Sitka, 15 knots, waves about 9 feet. Still southeast Yakutat, 20 knots with 8-foot waves. Along the northwestern Gulf Coast, winds are going to be out of the north-northwest. 15 knots off the Kenai, 10-foot waves, but through the entrance there of Cook Inlet, 30-35 knot winds out of the west-northwest with 9 to 10-foot waves. Variable winds up toward Anchorage with waves of only a couple of feet. And for Friday, winds will be upwards of southeast to east, 40-knot gales there at the entrance of Cook Inlet and off the Kenai with waves of 10 to 13 feet. Easterly winds 25 knots, 6-foot waves in Prince William Sound. North end of Cook Inlet, northeast winds 25 knots and waves 5 feet. Along the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, winds initially westerly 25 to 30 knots around Kodiak Island, waves 5 feet, Shelikof Strait. But notice to the west, winds pick up out of the southwest to southeast 40-knot gales out through the lower portion of the peninsula, with waves of 13 feet on the North Pacific side south of Sand Point, 8 feet there north of Cold Bay. And for Friday, as the frontal system works its way through the Alaska Peninsula, we are looking at winds upwards of 35, 40 knots near and south of Kodiak Island, waves 16, 17 feet. Bristol Bay, east winds 35 knots, waves 10 feet for Friday. And across the Aleutian chain, now overnight tonight, storm force winds central Aleutians. Those winds will come down a bit Thursday to 40 and 45 knot gales out of the southeast, with waves as high as 25 to near 30 feet on the North Pacific side and 12 to 17 feet on the Bering side, as that low passes just south and rides along the south side of the Aleutian chain. And then for Friday, winds become westerly, anywhere from 25 to as high as 35 and 40 knot gales on the south side of the Aleutians, south of Nikolsky and Unalaska. Waves there still could be in excess of 20 feet. On the Bering side, 9 to 11 foot waves, and then along the southwest coast, winds will be out of the southeast 20 to 25 knots, though 40 knot easterly gales in the vicinity of St. Paul, St. George, with waves as high as 14 feet. In Norton Sound, winds will be out of the southwest 15 knots, with waves there of just 3 feet. For Friday, with the low pressure south and southeast of the area, winds turn more north and northeasterly. We're still looking at 30, 35 knot winds offshore flow of the southwest coast there through the St. Paul, St. George, with waves upwards of 12 to 14 feet. And then northeast winds of 20 knots out of Norton Sound, 4-foot waves. And along the Arctic coast, winds will be generally out the southwest 10 to 15 knots with ice in place. But through the lower Chukchi Sea, winds through the Bering Strait will be out of the south 15 to 20 knots with waves 5 to 6 feet. And for Friday, look for generally south winds along the Arctic coast 10 to 15 knots with still the ice in place. And then increasing south winds through the lower Chukchi Sea to 25 knots with waves 4 to 7 feet. Winds turn more northerly, though, on the north side of St. Lawrence Island, 25 knots and waves 6 to 7 feet. There's that storm force low tonight, riding along just south of the central Aleutians. Low pressure out over the Gulf, bringing snow and breezier conditions in through the Panhandle. For Thursday afternoon, low remains just south of the Aleutians.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.